How are you doing? This is Alex, and welcome to another episode of Valet Stories. Boy, do we really have some stories for you. It has been hectic for the past month or so. Not just the car accidents. We've had a lot of things going on, and this episode specifically, I had to calm down. I've been so angry for the past couple of weeks, not with this one individual valet, but several valets because of, I guess the best way of putting it, it's kind of their arrogance that's coming across with the company, and I do not like it. So let me start the first story by letting you know I received a phone call from a valet a couple of weeks ago, and he told me that he forgot that he had another interview with another company. Now, he was still going to valet park at night, but during the day, it was going to be his day job and his career. And I'm thinking to myself, if it was that important, you wouldn't have forgotten about the interview, but he did. And he said, I need to take an hour or two off to do this interview. I said, well, you know the routine, and this is our protocol. If a shift is assigned to you, then that is your shift. If you cannot work that shift, then it's up to you to get that shift covered. Call your coworkers or whatever the case is, but get that shift covered. Not a problem at all. That was his job, and supposedly he had called around looking for other people to cover the shift. And he said he couldn't find anybody, so he took it upon himself to call our account and tell them that he wasn't going to be coming in because he had something else to do. That is not professional. That is not good. And that's a bad reflection on our company. And I really got pissed off with that. So that I told him that's equivalent to me calling, let's say, your professor at school and saying, hey, you know what? Chris is not coming in today because Chris needs to come into work. Or Chris is not going to take this final today because we need him to come to work instead. That's extremely selfish. So regardless, I called the account and said, don't worry about it. I'm going to get this covered. I have to safeguard the company, and that's my job. So I told this valet, hey, Josh, who actually is, I'm going to put Josh over there to cover you. You forgo your lunch break, and that will give you the 2 hours that you need. Josh will cover you for the extra hour, and I will cover Josh at the next restaurant. Josh was supposed to be somewhere else. I covered him at that restaurant until this valet got back. So I actually sent him a text message, and I told him, hey, please be mindful, get back as quickly as possible because Josh is covering you and I'm covering him, so get back as soon as possible. And he writes, understood. So I think everything is fine. So Josh goes to work, covers his account. I go to the other place, and would you have it, it actually started to rain, and I really don't like working in the rain. Luckily, I actually keep kind of a kit in the trunk with my uniform, with raincoats, with rain boots, because I've been caught in the rain before. But honestly, this rain was bad. It was actually almost a tornado, and the rain was coming sideways. It was so bad. We were running through puddles, and I was wet all the way up to my ankles. So needless to say, I wasn't happy considering I wasn't even planning on working. I know it's what I need to do. It's our company. But at the same time, I was not in the mood for this. So I would call over to Josh and say, hey, have you heard from him? And he said, I think his interview's over, but he's waiting for the food to come in for orientation. I'm like, what? This kid was supposed to come back an hour later, 2 hours later. This all started about 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock. He was supposed to be done at 4 o'clock or maybe 5 o'clock. It's now 6 o'clock and this guy's not back. So I'm a little upset. I text message to valet, no response. Of course, this valet is not coming back. So as the owner manager, I sit here and have to go into safeguard mode. So I sat there and said, okay, this valet is actually working tomorrow too. I need to start getting some of these shifts covered. So I replaced the next day's shift, and let me back up a bit. This valet was working an hourly account, and hourly accounts are different than the restaurant accounts. The restaurant accounts, I've mentioned before, are strictly tips, but the tips average much better than the hourly account. So let's say the hourly account pays 10 or 15 an hour. The restaurant may pay 20 an hour in tip compensation. So the valet was really depending on the $20 or $25 an hour at the tipped restaurant compensation the very next day. But I yanked him off of it because A, I need to safeguard it, and B, honestly, I'm not going to reward you with a higher paying position when you just screwed us over on the day before. So I got the shift covered. Next day, I'm like, you know what? This valet's terminated. I'm going to get rid of him. But some of my other valets are like, hey, Alex, we're extremely shorthanded. Please don't fire this valet. He's a decent valet. He made a mistake. And if you do fire him, it's going to put more pressure on all of us because we're going to have to compensate for his shifts. So I thought about it, and I had to really say to myself, and this is something, I cannot make decisions when I'm angry, because when I do, honestly, I just want to fire everybody. But I had to sit here and be rational with it and say, you know what? The guy is decent. He made a mistake. Let me just put him back on these hourly accounts because I can watch him a little better from that perspective and not put him on a restaurant so much where I don't have an eye on every single lot all the time. So I said, you know what? Let me take him off, put him back on hourly accounts. Well, this guy actually said, you know what? I'm not going to show up to the hourly accounts because purposely you took me off the cash account from the restaurant the day before. So I said, what happened to you the night before? He's like, well, it went to orientation. I said, I don't care. I specifically covered you and you purposely didn't come back. And he admitted that he had no intention on coming back to that hourly account afterwards. And honestly, that infuriated me. So I'm like, you know what? This arrogance, I don't understand it. Why don't you just communicate with me that way? Because he knows it's not right and he's only thinking about himself. He's not thinking about the company. He's not thinking about his coworkers. He's only thinking about himself. He's like, this is my life. This is my career. It couldn't have been so important if you forgot about the interviews, so that's another subject. So anyway, getting back into it, I took him off the restaurant account. I put him strictly on the hourly account so we can watch him. He says, I'm not going to show up. So at that point, I'm done. This kid's out of here. I'm not going to deal with this kid. And mind you, he's only been working for maybe 30, 45 days. And this is his arrogance, and he's only 22 years old. Not saying 22-year-olds don't have sense, because I have a lot of very mature 22-year-olds, but this one was strictly selfish. He told me specifically when he came on board, he wanted to make a certain amount of money. And I told him, hey, that's very realistic working with our company. You can achieve those numbers. But then he finds out later that he can make that money easier with fewer shifts, and that's where he wants to be. He doesn't want to work hard for that money. He wants to work easier. I'm like, well, see, again. So when I start disciplining him and telling him it doesn't work that way, especially for a new hire, he tries to start telling me that all the other valets that work for our company suck. He started throwing them all under a bus. He's like, well, this valet does this. This valet listens to his phone while he should be working. This valet goes and takes a break for, instead of 1 hour, 2 hours. So he started throwing everybody else under the bus to deflect the attention and the heat that I was trying to put on him. I really don't do well with that. Now, of course, I take that information, put it in my back pocket, and address that with those valets then, but it kind of shows a lot about this individual that would literally throw your coworkers under the bus. He didn't care. He only cared about himself. And the only thing he was concerned about was paying his bills, as if he was the only one that had bills. So the bottom line is, after the second time he didn't show up, I was done. There's no way I'm going to continue working this guy. It's only a matter of time before he does this again. And honestly, it's extremely dangerous. This kid was arrogant. He thought he was the best of everybody, and he really wasn't. I can tell more stories about this guy later. Number two, he felt that his bills were more important than everybody else's. And three, he didn't care. He literally called the accountant and told them that he wasn't coming in because he had something more important to do. I mean, honestly, the balls on someone to do something like this, that just blows me away. Now, the cool part was I was able to spend time with some of the valets I hadn't spent time with for a while. So I got to spend time with Kyle out there, and Josh eventually came over afterwards. But I really enjoyed it because we got to meet really interesting people. I got to drive the new Tesla Y, which definitely I'm not a fan of, because get this, you know I'm not a big fan of Tesla, and here's something else that kind of supports that. It's pouring rain, and they have this new credit, it's not a new credit card, but it has this credit card thing. So I have to run over to the car, it's pouring rain, and put this thing on a B-pillar for at least 3 seconds in the pouring rain. Whereas if you had a regular fob, you can hit the button, it's unlocked by the time you get over to the car. But Tesla wants me physically to put this card against a B-pillar for 3 seconds while it's pouring rain. And I mean, it was literally pouring rain sideways. Now, the good thing was I got to actually meet a lady. She came in and she was on a blind date. And she's like, hey, how do I look? I'm like, you look good. She's like, well, not bad considering I've been back and forth to Afghanistan for the past 40 hours. I'm like, really? She's like, yes, I'm a nurse and we were bringing over all these refugees to Atlanta, I think taking them to a certain location. So I'm like, you're definitely going to have something to talk about during your blind date. But I enjoy and I miss these conversations. So I'll bitch about being out in the field and having to work when I had something else actually planned. But I really do enjoy it. I really do enjoy the company and I really do enjoy this industry. But going back to this arrogant valet, we couldn't stand it. I would rather personally work all those shifts that he was working myself than employ someone like that, because that guy is selfish. Not only is he not looking out for the company, I had something personal to do, he didn't care. He was only concerned about himself. More or less, knowing that Josh was covering him, he didn't care. Knowing that Josh would have made more money at the restaurant that night, this guy didn't care. He had full intention on never coming back. And honestly, we don't need to employ people like that.